Hey guys, tonight we drift into the mist-shrouded slopes of an old Japanese village, where even the wind walks on tiptoe and the moon doesn't rise so much as stretch softly into the sky. You're standing at the edge of a sleepy field. The grass is damp with dew, the kind that makes your ankles feel like they've dipped into a cool memory. Off in the distance, a warm light flickers between the trees, as if someone forgot to turn off the stars properly. And just like that, the story begins with a feather falling through fog. Crane. Not just any crane, mind you. This one has unusually good posture, a suspiciously thoughtful expression, and a pouch slung across her back like she's late for a very calm meeting. Her wings are long and snowy, the kind of wings that don't just fly but glide, as if the air rearranges itself just to stay beneath her. And she is not in a hurry. You watch her descend slowly through the haze, her long legs reaching toward the cobblestone street of a village that, until this moment, had been experiencing a record-breaking streak of absolutely nothing happening. She lands in front of an abandoned tea house. It creaks slightly at the roofline in surprise. The sign out front, hanging by one last brave nail, swings once, then stops, as if to say, "Something's about to begin, but please keep your voice down." The crane eyes the building. Her feathers ruffle in a thoughtful breeze. She nods once, like a contractor inspecting a fixer-upper, and steps inside. Now, I know what you're thinking. Birds don't usually lease property. But this one is a mythological creature, and mythological zoning laws are very lax. Also, nobody else wanted the place. According to local rumor, the last tenant had tried to run a rice-based shoe store and failed miserably. You can still see one of the prototypes in the corner, slightly moldy, still impressively shaped like a sandal. So the crane sets down her bag. It makes a soft clink, a sound that isn't coins but tools. Lantern tools. Inside that canvas pouch are spools of thread, folded silks, bits of stained glass, and a few tiny jars filled with starlight. Not the full kind you find in constellations, just leftovers, the crumbs of light too small to be missed by the sky. She sweeps the floor once with a wing. Dust swirls up in the golden light and doesn't even try to settle. You can feel it in your chest. The star's something calm and strange. A tea house about to become something warmer. Lanterns. That's what she's come to build. No one knows exactly why. Some say it was a dream she had while nesting in a cherry tree. Others think she once saw a lantern festival in Kyoto and never quite got over the aesthetic. Scholars still argue whether cranes are capable of this level of interior design planning. But there she is, unpacking wire frames and glow thread, humming a little tune that sounds suspiciously like the breeze through bamboo. Outside, a cat watches through the cracked window. It does not blink. This is not a regular cat. It's one of those village guardians that pretends to be aloof but secretly writes poetry in the dirt. It licks a paw slowly and thinks, interesting. Finally, and across the street, an old man sneezes. It's not related to the story, but it's part of the atmosphere. Back inside, the crane opens a tiny scroll. It's written in a spiral, beginning at the center and working its way out like the universe trying to explain itself. On it, diagrams, inked blueprints of impossible lantern shapes, some shaped like birds, others like question marks, one that seems to be just a glowing puddle on purpose. She begins work. First step, measuring silence. That's what all good lantern makers start with. She paces the room, listening to how the floorboards speak to the walls. There's an echo here, but not an annoying one. More like the kind of sound that says, "Yes, light would look lovely in this corner." She smiles. Or does whatever cranes do that's close to smiling. Maybe she fluffs a tail feather or exhales thoughtfully. Either way, you feel it. The room agrees. You're standing just inside the doorway now. Nobody asked you to come in, but you did anyway, like a breeze curious about its destination. You're not in the way. You're part of the stillness, which is exactly the kind of help the crane appreciates. Outside, the mist thickens, just enough to make the lantern light feel more like a secret. And somewhere far above, a star winks. It might be sending approval, or just tired. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and the local time in the comments. It's oddly cozy to know where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The crane begins her work with a lantern shaped like a crescent moon that had once overslept. She unfolds thin bamboo ribs with such care, you think she was tuning a harp made of spiderwebs. You watch as her feathers move deliberately, each one gliding past the next without hurry. The paper she uses is soaked in rice milk and aged whisperings. When it flutters in the air, it sounds like distant footsteps over moss. She hums while working. Not a tune you recognize, but something older, part lullaby, part weather pattern. It moves through the room and settles on the corners like warm fog. You breathe it in and feel your thoughts slow down as if they, too, were made of folded silk. She stitches the frame together using threads so fine, even the dust holds its breath. Occasionally, a gust of wind tries to poke its nose in through the cracks in the wall. But the crane gives it a side-eye so legendary that the wind immediately reconsiders its choices and politely tiptoes back outside. The first lantern begins to glow. Not with fire. No, that would be too obvious. It glows with remembered warmth. A kind of soft yellow you'd associate with holding a teacup in winter or watching your grandmother nap in a sunbeam. It's not light for seeing. It's light for feeling seen. You step closer. The crane doesn't mind. She gestures gently to a cushion in the corner made from repurposed temple robes. You sit. It smells faintly of incense and dried persimmon. Now the second lantern is stranger. It's shaped like a koi fish doing a cartwheel. Scholars still argue whether the fish is actually mid-spin or simply dramatic. Either way, the lantern glows a gentle orange pink, and when the crane lights it, you swear you hear the soft splash of memory, like a childhood summer filtered through tea leaves. Outside, someone coughs. The cat from earlier is now napping on the windowsill with one eye half open, purely out of professional nosiness. The crane's movements are slow, not out of laziness, but because every action has a purpose. She's aligning threads with a kind of ancient precision, the sort passed down from generation to generation without ever needing to be explained. Suddenly a knock at the door. It's not alarming, just unexpected. The crane tilts her head, as cranes often do when considering the existential meaning of doorways. She walks over, talons silent on the wooden floor, and opens the door a sliver. Standing there is an umbrella. Just an umbrella. Closed. Leaning politely. You squint. Then the umbrella coughs. I was told you might have tea, it says. The crane, unfazed, opens the door fully. With the grace of someone used to mythical oddities, she gestures to the corner where a teapot steams gently beside a tiny bonsai tree that looks suspiciously like it's been eavesdropping. The umbrella hops balances itself near the wall, and lets out a long sigh. Rain's been tough lately, it mutters. No one appreciates a good drizzle anymore. The crane nods solemnly, pours a cup of tea, chrysanthemum, judging by the floating petals, and sets it before the umbrella. You watch in silence as the steam rises and forms a brief dragon shape before disappearing into the ceiling. Scholars still argue whether talking umbrellas count as sentient, you whisper. The umbrella spins in place. I heard that. The crane chuckles quietly, a sound like feathers brushing stone. You realize that, somehow without fanfare, this quiet workshop has become a kind of gathering place. Not for the loud or the famous, but for the soft-spoken relics of forgotten dreams, misty memories, drowsy objects, mythological oddballs in search of something warm. And all around, the lanterns begin to multiply. Some shaped like stars with opinions, others like teardrops caught mid-fall. One resembles a yawn wearing a kimono. Each glows gently, with hues that exist somewhere between nostalgia and lullaby. Outside, the fog deepens. You'd worry about getting lost, but you know the light will always guide you back. You lean against the wall, your eyelids a little heavier now. And Crane keeps stitching. One lantern, dangling slightly crooked hums. Not a melody, but a low resonant sound like a cat purring through a pillow. You glance at it. It's shaped like a sandal. Yes, a single left sandal, embroidered with delicate waves and little cherry blossoms, as if it once belonged to someone who got halfway through a love story and then took a nap. You ask the crane about it. She doesn't answer immediately. Instead, she picks it up, adjusts the silk thread holding it, and says, "That one was made from a goodbye someone never got to say." You nod, as if that makes perfect sense. Then she points to a squat lantern with the appearance of a sleepy plum. "And that one's made from laughter that got stuck in someone's throat for a century. Took a while to get it untangled." You look around the room, and it dawns on you. Every lantern here contains something that got left behind. An emotion, a dream, a moment that floated too long in the air and needed a home. Apparently, this is the place they end up. A soft breeze rolls in, not from the outside, but from one of the lanterns, probably the one shaped like a paper fan mid-sneeze. The breeze carries a hint of roasted barley and rain-drenched wood. Tea's ready. The umbrella says from the corner, slightly more open than before. You suspect it's feeling quite social now. The crane pours a cup for you. The tea is cloudy, like it's thinking about something profound. You take a sip and feel like a memory you didn't know you had just sat beside you. Then, without warning, the floor creaks. Not the kind of creak that signals danger. No, this is the sound of arrival. The crane tilts her head. You follow her gaze to the corner of the room where a boulder has materialized. Yes, boulder. Round, fuzzy with moss, and looking extremely unbothered by the laws of physics. Is that normal? You ask. The crane shrugs. The boulder speaks. I was promised a nap. Its voice is slow, deliberate, like honey trickling uphill. You're not sure how it traveled here or why it picked this moment, but you also don't feel like asking. It settles itself into a corner and immediately begins snoring, each exhale releasing a faint glow of yellowish mist that smells like autumn. Some guest, the crane whispers, bring their own dreams. You find that oddly comforting. Across the room, the umbrella is now fully open, basking in a sunbeam that wasn't there a minute ago. It mumbles something about taxes and turns slightly to the left. Maybe umbrellas, too, need moments of peace. The crane gets back to work. This time, she builds a lantern shaped like an echo. It's hard to describe. It's not quite visible, but you sense it. It flickers in and out, like a thought you almost had. Every time she ties a thread to it, you remember something from childhood, briefly, and then it's gone. Scholars still argue whether echo lanterns are ethical. The umbrella quips. Only if they ask for consent, the crane replies. Outside, the fog curls around the workshop like a cat around its favorite chair. The air grows quieter, and the world seems to slow to a hush. You close your eyes just for a second. When you open them, the crane is balancing a lantern shaped like a folded letter on one wing, and she's blowing a soft breath into it. Inside the lantern, a light blooms like someone finally admitting they missed you. You're not sure if it's yours, but it's gentle, and it's glowing, and it's more than enough. The boulder snores louder, which somehow makes the whole place feel safer. A little bell chimes. Not because anyone rang it, but because the lantern shaped like a bell just finished remembering why it was made. And somewhere outside, a distant owl gives a one-note hoot of approval. You're beginning to think this workshop isn't just for lanterns. It's for anything that wants to glow again. You blink slowly, and when your eyes open again, the crane is deep in concentration. Her feathers shimmer slightly, like moonlight caught in motion, as she gently unrolls a sheet of translucent paper. It looks too delicate to exist, like it was whispered into being. "What's that one made from?" you ask, barely above a whisper yourself. She doesn't answer right away. Instead, she places a claw-footed ladle beside the paper. You watch, confused and fascinated, as the ladle begins to hum softly, like a lullaby being sung by a warm spoon. "It's soaked in moonlight," the crane finally says. "Left to ferment beneath the plum tree for 30 nights. You nod slowly. "Of course it is." She dips a tiny brush into a bowl of ink that smells faintly of roasted sesame and forgotten lullabies. With a stroke that feels like a sigh, she paints a single line across the paper. The line glows briefly, then fades, like a dream that knew not to linger. "This will be a soap lantern," she explains. "They only light up in bathtubs." You try to imagine the logistics of that and realize it's better not to. Instead, you ask, "What's it for?" "For rinsing off the kind of sadness that sticks behind your ears." You feel like you understand exactly what she means, even though you absolutely don't. Behind you, the boulder lets out a gravelly sigh. It's shifted slightly, just enough to reveal a small mushroom sprouting on its upper flank. The mushroom appears to be wearing a very tiny apron and holding an even tinier clipboard. You suspect it's taking inventory. Across the room, a new lantern takes shape. It resembles a small loaf of bread, round and golden, and still somehow steaming. "That one's for remembering meals you never finished," the crane says almost casually. A second later, a little gust of wind rolls through the workshop, and the bread lantern lets out a soft giggle. You pretend that's totally normal. You take another sip of tea. This time it tastes like the first time you saw snow. You look down into the cup and realize it's glowing faintly. Not like a light, more like a soft internal shrug. The kind of glow that says, "Don't worry, we've got you." A subtle rustling draws your attention to the ceiling. Hanging among the beams is a crane-shaped lantern, but it's upside down and appears to be meditating. It opens one eye and says, "I used to be a feather. I've had a long career." You decide not to ask follow-up questions. The crane is now adding finishing touches to a lantern that's shaped like a koi fish curled in on itself. "This one's for remembering something just before you fall asleep," she says. You feel that tug in your chest. That feeling when you're halfway between awake and not, and your thoughts start turning into things. Boats may have yawned out wishes, keys to doors you'll never open, socks that belong to memories instead of feet. The workshop starts to smell like steamed rice and rain-soaked pine needles. Outside, the mist thickens, as if leaning in to listen. The umbrella now has a tiny ceramic cup resting on it. You're not sure when that happened. The cup has a face. It looks judgmental, but in a cozy way. "You still haven't tried the lantern biscuit," it says. You're just about to ask what a lantern biscuit is when the boulder emits a snort, sending a swirl of golden dust into the air. The dust slowly drifts down and lands on a square piece of folded cloth in the crane's talons. With gentle precision, she unfolds it, revealing an intricate patchwork of old ticket stubs, pressed petals, and fragments of lullabies stitched together with thread that seems to shimmer in 6 dimensions. "This is for a very specific type of lantern," she says softly. "One that only lights up when someone needs to cry without knowing why." You stare at the cloth. It stares back. Emotion rises in your throat, like a hiccup wrapped in a poem. Scholars still argue whether these lanterns cause tears, the umbrella interjects, or just makes space for them. The crane nods once solemnly. You look around the workshop. Each lantern flickers at its own rhythm, a quiet choreography of feelings too subtle to speak aloud. The kind that live between sighs, in the folds of scarves, beneath bed pillows, and just under the surface of old laughter. You sip your tea again. Now it tastes like your grandmother's perfume, if her perfume were somehow made from soft promises and the sound of knitting needles. And then, just as you feel yourself drifting again, a small squeaky voice pipes up from beneath the floorboards. Does anyone have any spare wishes? Mine expired. You glance at the crane. She smiles faintly and begins crafting a new lantern. It's shaped like a question mark, and it glows even before she finishes. A hush settles across the workshop, but it's not the kind of silence that feels empty. It's more like the cozy quiet of a room full of sleeping teapots, each dreaming its own tiny opera. The crane moves like she's floating, though you can clearly hear the sound of her claws clicking softly on the wood. It's the kind of sound that would make a squirrel rethink all its life choices. She pauses in front of a low shelf, gently pulling out a stack of what appear to be missed envelopes. Lanterns aren't the only things we make here, she says without turning around. She hands you one. It's cool to the touch and vaguely damp, like a letter mailed from a cloud. As you inspect it, delicate lettering appears across the front in a script that looks suspiciously like it's been written in size. It's blank, you whisper. For now, the crane says. It writes itself once it knows you better. You place the envelope down, but it shuffles a little closer to you when you're not looking. Behind the crane, a wall of drawers stretches up to the ceiling, each one labeled with cryptic tags like leftover light, regret number 17, crumbs from laughing too hard, and things people say when they're not ready to sleep yet. From a leftover light drawer, the crane withdraws a tiny orb wrapped in velvet. She unwraps it carefully and places it inside a lantern that looks like a delicate paper dumpling. The orb settles in with a soft ping and immediately starts humming an old lullaby in a key no one uses anymore. That one's for guests who need to remember something soft before they remember something hard, the crane explains. You nod slowly. That makes uncomfortable sense. At that moment, the paper umbrella leans slightly and mutters, well, that's not ominous at all. The stack of bamboo mats rolls itself open behind you, clearly preparing for guests. One of them is embroidered with a foxtail pattern that seems to wag faintly when you blink. You lie down for a second, not because you're tired, but because the mat politely insists by shifting under your feet. The air smells now of warm ink and oranges peeled in another room. A breeze drifts through the open window and tugs at the edges of your thoughts like a curious raccoon going through your brain's picnic basket. The crane begins constructing a new lantern in complete silence. It's shaped like a staircase that spirals upward and then just sort of stops. This one doesn't have a function, she says. You wait. It just exists, she adds. You continue waiting. For people who aren't ready to get anywhere yet. There it is. She hangs it from a wooden beam with a piece of string no thicker than a whisper. The lantern sways slightly. You're not sure if it's responding to the breeze or your questions. Meanwhile, from a corner of the room, something squeaks. A glowing shoe hops out from under a workbench. It taps its heel twice on the ground, bows to the crane, and then jumps directly into a bowl of rice. No sudden movements, the umbrella whispers. I wasn't planning any, you whisper back. The crane picks up another folded lantern. It looks like a sleeping cat with a feather tucked behind its ear. This one's for remembering the exact moment you realized naps were underrated. You sip your tea again. It now tastes like that one summer afternoon when everything felt warm and slow, and the air smelled like possibility. Scholars still argue whether lantern tea causes these memories. The crane murmurs, or if the tea simply allows them to rise from where they were already curled up. Outside, it begins to rain. Not a hard rain, but a soft, companionable drizzle that sounds like 1,000 tiny apologies tapping politely at the roof. A fresh lantern floats down from the ceiling and hovers beside your head. It hums faintly, just above hearing, like an idea you can almost remember. "What's this one for?" you ask. The crane tilts her head. "It's for people who are pretending they're not tired." The umbrella lets out a low, approving snort. "We get a lot of those." Just then, a drawer labeled, "If only creaks open all on its own." A paper crane flutters out, performs a somersault in midair, and lands neatly on the edge of your teacup. It gazes at you with what you swear is quiet sympathy. The crane doesn't react. She's already halfway through folding another lantern, this one shaped like a boat made of receipts. "For regrets that were too polite to speak up," she says calmly. You're pretty sure your eyebrows raise in surprise, but they're immediately soothed by a warm draft of steam rising from a kettle somewhere you can't quite see. Everything starts to feel a little dreamlike. The tea now tastes like the sound of someone humming to themselves in the next room. You close your eyes for a second and picture all the lanterns glowing together, some bright, some dim, some just gently thinking about it. They seem to breathe in sync, like a choir of contented sighs. And when you open your eyes again, the crane has finished folding a final piece of lantern paper. It's shaped like a doorway with no door. "This one's for guests who haven't arrived yet," she says. You realize she's talking about you. You stare at the doorway-shaped lantern for a moment, then at the crane, and then back at the lantern, as if maybe one of them will blink first and explain what exactly is happening. Neither does. Instead, the crane glides over to the nearest wall, which gently unfolds into a shelf of teacups arranged by personality. Some look stern. Some look sleepy. One has clearly been crying, but insists it's fine. You're drawn to a wide-brimmed, slightly wobbly cup with a design that looks like a nap halfway through happening. "Try this one," the crane suggests, handing it to you. The cup is warm and heavy, like it knows things. You sip, and the tea tastes like a question you forgot to ask years ago. It's oddly comforting. Meanwhile, the umbrella is now deep in conversation with a tiny mop in the corner. You catch snippets. "Mildew is a mindset, not a fate. What if I like the smell of nostalgia?" Then you've clearly never met a regretful sponge. You nod respectfully and return your attention to the crane, who is now, of course, talking to a scroll. The scroll is curled up like a cat and seems deeply invested in the conversation, occasionally twitching its parchment. They're debating punctuation. The umbrella explains helpfully. There's a comma that may or may not be haunted. The crane unwraps another lantern, this one shaped like a fish with windows. It floats lazily in midair, then spins a little as if showing off. She attaches it to a ribbon dangling from the ceiling and gives it a gentle tug. The fish lantern lets out a bloop and fills the room with a sound like soft footsteps on moss. "This one's for people who never got to say goodbye," she murmurs. You don't ask how she knows. By now, you've accepted that this lantern workshop runs on dream logic and quiet emotional sabotage. In a good way. She places a tiny bell beside the fish lantern. The bell rings once. Somewhere a cloud blushes. You notice another lantern on the floor. It's shaped like a doorbell, but emits the scent of cinnamon and mild embarrassment. "What's that one for?" you ask, already bracing for the answer. "That's for visitors who knock and forget why." "Oh, of course." Outside, the rain continues, but now it smells faintly like chamomile and old postcards. A squirrel wanders by the window, wearing a tiny apron and carrying a tray of what might be steamed acorns. You make direct eye contact. It nods. You nod back. It leaves. "Regular," says the crane. The umbrella lets out a long sigh. He's always early for next week. In the back of the room, a new lantern begins to assemble itself. It's shaped like a ladder, but each rung is a folded compliment. You try to read a few as you walk by. You remember people's names even when they think you won't. You're the kind of tired that deserves extra stars. You once held the door open for someone's entire emotional journey. The ladder glows a little brighter with each step you take. You don't climb it yet, but it lingers nearby, just in case. The crane is folding a final lantern of the afternoon, a paper globe with soft blue lines and a single continent shaped like a question mark. This one, she says quietly, is for people who are still searching for what they're searching for. You sip your tea again. It now tastes like walking home late at night after something unexpectedly nice happened. Scholars still argue whether these lanterns reveal truth, the crane adds, or whether they simply reflect whatever kindness is nearby. Your cup hums in agreement. The umbrella turns slightly toward you. You're doing better than you think, it says without warning. You try to thank it, but the words come out as a soft yawn. You're not sure if that was your voice or the chair you're sitting on. Either way, the room seems pleased. A final gust of breeze stirs the lanterns, and they all shift together in harmony, like a soft exhale from the fabric of the universe itself. In the very back of the workshop, a lantern flickers briefly, then settles. It looks like a dandelion seed caught in a jar of honey. It blinks once, just once. For when you don't need to say anything, the crane whispers, as if remembering something long ago and far away. You sit for a moment longer, watching the light drift and dance across the walls. Somewhere, someone begins tuning a teapot, and for just a moment, you forget you ever needed anything else. The teapot is, without question, tuning itself. It hums a scale and steams soft, breathy notes that lift toward the rafters like a warm sigh spiraling upward. Around it, 4 tiny teaspoons begin tapping out a rhythm on the lip of a sugar jar, as if rehearsing for a concert attended exclusively by dreams and mild regrets. You blink slowly. The crane doesn't seem surprised. She's placing a square napkin onto a tray, folding it precisely 7 times until it resembles a perfectly sleeping cat. It purrs once, then turns into steam. No one addresses this. What is happening right now, you murmur, mostly to the universe. The umbrella perks up like it's been waiting for that question. Tea overture, it replies. Happens every 7th cup. You're lucky, it's in a major key today. The teapot hits a high note. The walls flutter in response. Somewhere, a drawer opens and closes, sighing like it remembered something important and then promptly forgot again. The crane gestures toward a new lantern on her workbench. It's shaped like a paper boat balanced on the tip of a wave, and its candle flickers with the confidence of a toddler in a talent show. This one's for apologies never sent, she says softly, attaching a label written in what you're pretty sure is emotionally repressed ink. The lantern drifts upward, bumps into a ceiling beam, then scoots sideways as if whispering, "Oops, my bad." You feel oddly seen. Next, she starts assembling a lantern made from, of all things, loose buttons, string, and what appears to be the leftover light from early morning fog. It jiggles when it breathes. You ask the crane if this one has a specific purpose. She considers. It's for people who can't throw things away, especially memories, or socks with only one hole. Scholars still argue whether sentimentality is a strength, adds the umbrella, or simply a particularly well-dressed kind of weakness. You nod, because either way, it makes for good lighting. The lantern finishes assembling itself and does a little hop, like a bean that knows its magic but hasn't quite mastered the timing. Outside, the wind sighs through a field of bamboo like a librarian shushing an argument between bookmarks. Inside, a tiny alarm clock on the shelf rings once, not as a warning, but more as a friendly suggestion. You and the umbrella ignore it. Suddenly, a drawer creaks open. Out pops a feather duster with opera-level dramatic flair, fluffing itself like it's preparing for a spotlight solo. It clears its throat, somehow, points one plume at the lantern display, and says, "Dust hath gathered where serenity should reign." It flutters dramatically over to the shelf, bumps its own reflection, then gasps and faints. The crane gives it a moment. "He's been like that since the tea spilled in '03, she says. You think she means 1903. You don't ask. A soft knock at the door. A lantern delivery pigeon enters, wearing little ankle bells and a very serious expression. It drops off a satchel and bows so politely that even the mirror bows back. "Guest book updates," the crane murmurs, rifling through scrolls that now purr when unrolled. 2 new dreamers checked in from somewhere near Finland, one apology from a cloud, and someone's future just called to cancel. "We'll reschedule." You raise a brow. The umbrella explains, futures are like soup, best when stirred gently. You don't know what that means, but it absolutely sounds like wisdom. Suddenly, a new lantern begins to grow. Yes, grow. I have a crack in the floor. It's shaped like a spiral seashell, pulsing with a color that doesn't technically exist in the spectrum, but definitely reminds you of sleeping beside a waterfall. The crane doesn't even look. That one's self-planning. For when the wish arrives before the question, you think about that longer than you expected. Just then, the teapot finishes its overture with a gentle trill, and the teaspoons clink once in unison, bowing like musicians leaving the stage. The sugar jar tips its lid in appreciation. The applause is mostly metaphysical. You breathe out, and in that quiet breath, somewhere between the scent of bergamot and whispering rice paper, you realize something. You don't need to understand any of this. You just need to be here, softly, quietly, like a question mark resting between chapters. The crane smiles. The umbrella drifts slightly closer, and the newest lantern, just finished, glows with the wordless comfort of knowing there's nothing left to fix tonight. Not everything needs an ending, after all. Word count, 1089. You blink again, not because you're tired, although you most certainly are, but because the walls seem to have shifted ever so slightly to make room for a new type of silence. Not an empty kind. A full one. The kind you might accidentally bump into if you were tiptoeing through a museum of forgotten size. In this freshly rearranged hush, a low chime hums through the lantern shop, soft and circular, like a sound curling back in on itself. You turn to the umbrella, but it's no longer beside you. It's now in the corner, wearing a hat. The hat is a small stack of playing cards. Don't ask. The crane has begun unpacking a box. The box is made of woven regrets and tied with a string you're 90% sure is stolen from a kite that never landed. She places it gently on a tatami mat, opens it with a whisper, and from inside lifts a crane. Another crane. This one is paper. No, not just paper. It's made from old love letters, folded so precisely that every emotion has turned into a sharp edge. Its wings twitch, then stretch. It bows deeply to you. Her name is Kiko, says the crane quietly. She handles the lanterns for lost things. Kiko flutters up to a small perch by the window and sighs in 4 different dialects of wind. She glances at you. Somehow, you know exactly what she means. Do you have anything you'd like to lose today? You think. Maybe that awkward thing you said in 5th grade. Or that time you sent a message, then immediately panicked and unsent it. Or the name you keep forgetting, but pretend you remember. Kiko nods without waiting for your answer, and a tiny lantern made of lavender fabric and whisper threads begins forming at her feet. Meanwhile, the umbrella is now conducting a symphony for teacups. You notice this because one by one, the teacups are spinning slowly on their saucers, humming a tune that feels exactly like floating in a warm bath made of nostalgia and cloud fruit. "What's cloud fruit?" you whisper. The umbrella doesn't answer, but a nearby napkin folds itself into a fruit shape and rolls your way. You pick it up. It smells like a memory you haven't had yet. Back at the work table, the crane is carefully threading a single strand of moonbeam through a new lantern. This one is shaped like a snail shell, and every curve contains a lullaby. "What's this one for?" you ask, mesmerized. "For people who fall asleep too late and wake up too early," she says, not looking up. The lantern nods as if in agreement, then curls into itself and begins to breathe. You don't question it. You shift your gaze to the window, where night has arrived politely. It peeks in like a guest who doesn't want to disturb anything, but wouldn't mind a cup of something warm if you're already making one. A moth flutters against the glass. It's wearing glasses. You try not to stare. "You're adjusting well," says the umbrella, now reclining against a teapot that seems to be steeping itself in existential questions. "Am I?" you reply. The umbrella shrugs. Either that, or you've already forgotten what normal is. The crane places another lantern on the shelf. This one is for unread books. It's covered in small, glowing symbols that rearrange themselves into different titles when you look too long. You recognize one of them. A book you were supposed to read years ago. The lantern chuckles kindly. "Some stories don't want to be read," says the umbrella. "They just want to be known." You nod. It's the only reasonable response. Kiko chirps softly, flutters once more, and then disappears behind a stack of blank scrolls that hum softly in their sleep. In the background, a tiny storm cloud peeks out from a teacup. It sneezes once, rains just enough to dampen a sugar cube, and then vanishes again. You suspect it'll be back. Somewhere near your elbow, a spoon writes a haiku. It's not very good, but it's heartfelt. You lean back on the floor cushions, letting the weight of unsent postcards and still warm tea settle around you. Your eyelids feel like they've been dipped in warm ink. The crane has begun another lantern. This one is made from paper that's never been written on. It's blank. It glows anyway. You shift slightly, just enough for your elbow to bump into something soft and unusually triangular. It turns out to be a folded towel. Not just any towel. This one is folded into the shape of a sleeping swan, complete with a single teardrop embroidered at the tip of its beak. You aren't sure if it's sad or just really into performance art. The crane nods approvingly from across the room. "Ah, yes. Towel folding. An ancient and misunderstood discipline." She steps delicately toward a low table scattered with cloth, ribbon, and exactly one confused paperclip. You watch as she picks up a square of fabric the color of toasted sunrise and begins folding it with slow, meditative precision. "One fold for grace," she murmurs. "Another fold. One for balance. Another. One for that one dream you keep having where your teeth are made of noodles." You hesitate. "Wait, what?" The towel doesn't answer. It's too busy becoming a tiny fox curled up on a moonbeam. Towel folding, she explains as she adjusts a corner, is less about geometry and more about inner climate. You tilt your head. She clarifies. The towel knows what it wants to be. You're just there to help it remember. That actually makes a weird amount of sense. She motions for you to try. A gentle puff of fabric floats your way and lands in your lap. It smells faintly of cedar and very faintly of someone you once stood behind in a queue and felt inexplicably at peace next to. You try folding. Your first attempt results in something resembling an anxious crab. Your second attempt becomes what might be a deflated crown. The third one, well, it starts folding itself. You've unlocked beginner towel sentience, the umbrella says, clearly impressed. Most guests never get past ornamental loaf, the crane adds. You don't know what that means, and you're not sure you want to. The room begins to shimmer gently with the sound of dozens of folded forms, small dragons, sleepy koi fish, abstract concepts, rustling gently on the shelf. They breathe in unison. Or maybe you're imagining it. But even if you are, the room seems to appreciate it. Kiko, the paper crane, flutters down and deposits a tiny note next to your latest owl creation. The note reads, "You are here, nothing more." You nod. The affirmation feels oddly grounding. Then, from a far corner, a dust bunny wearing spectacles emerges. It carries a scroll. Daily Tao Koan delivery. It squeaks, voiced like a yawn wrapped in tea leaves. The crane unrolls the scroll and reads aloud. If a towel folds itself in the forest, does the forest feel refreshed? You're not sure whether to laugh or ponder deeply. So you do a little of both. A gong sounds somewhere. It's more of a bong, really. You turn to see a new lantern being lit. This one shaped like a sideways hourglass, glowing with slow-motion glitter. It's labeled Procrastinated Enlightenment. Perfect timing, the crane says softly. That one only glows when someone folds a towel while thinking about folding towels. You didn't even realize that's what you'd been doing. She gestures for you to place your fox towel creation on a low shelf beside the hourglass lantern. As you do, the towel curls up even tighter, sighs once, and falls into a visible nap. The umbrella hums a few bars of an unfamiliar lullaby. A nearby stack of cushions harmonizes in minor key. The crane begins folding again, this time crafting a lotus made of layered wishes. You ask what she does with all the folded forms. They stay, she says, until they're ready to become part of the light. You watch a small towel fold itself into a lantern midair and float lazily to the ceiling, where it settles like a sleepy moth against a paper panel roof. And then, as if to reassure you further, a kettle nearby whispers, "Don't worry, none of them are ever in a rush." Neither you realize, are you? You blink slowly, and now you're holding something unfamiliar, a menu. Or perhaps a scroll. No, it's both. A scroll menu made of rice paper, tied with a thread of moonlight and sealed with a dab of honey. Naturally, as you unfurl it, golden ink shimmers in soft curls. The top reads, "Whisper Lantern Tea and Wellness Offerings." The list is extensive. Steamed Plum Daydream Therapy, 9-herb cloud lullaby wrap, lantern polishing with existential commentary, rice pillow reincarnation simulation, cupped silence with floating lotus seeds, oops, all maps blanket buffet, comedic steam rant by a slightly annoyed kettle, whisper yoga for voices, not bodies, origami counseling, strictly paper-based emotions, candle gazing until the candle blinks back, a beverage called tea with a question mark. You reach the bottom, where it simply reads, "Additions daily, probably forever." The crane peeks over your shoulder. Yes, the menu got a little out of hand. You wonder aloud if people can actually try all of it. She nods solemnly. Some haven't left in years. One is still deciding between the scented Psy exfoliation or the fermented giggle foot soak. You glance at the prices. Instead of numbers, each item is labeled with currencies like one pleasant thought, half a forgotten dream, and a breeze shaped like someone you miss. You ask how payment is collected. The crane just says, "The mountain keeps track." Of course it does. Kiko flutters over, balancing a stack of new suggestion cards. One reads, "Can I schedule a session with a kettle who sounds like my grandmother?" Another, "Please create a tea that tastes like finishing a to-do list." The crane sighs. "We tried. That one was too powerful." Everyone fell asleep for 2 weeks. As you roll up the menu, the lanterns above you flicker, one in the shape of a goldfish, another like an origami crane mid-stretch. Each one glows warmer when a guest mentally commits to something new on the menu. A bell rings once. A guest across the room gasps softly. "I'll take the candle," whispering with mild regret, she murmurs. A teacup rolls into view to accept her order. Meanwhile, a robe, self-motivated, clearly, drapes itself over your shoulders and adjusts with a confident shimmy. It smells faintly of distant rain and well-intentioned promises. The scroll menu shuffles back into your hands. The crane taps a listing you hadn't noticed before. Floating lantern journaling. Write thoughts you've never had, then set them adrift. You look up. A paper lantern slowly unfurls near the ceiling. Inside is a floating pen, dipping itself into light. You whisper a thought, not yours, but it feels like it could be. "I miss the version of me that believed wishes had deadlines." The pen writes it carefully. The lantern folds inward. Then, with the gentlest exhale, it rises through a skylight you hadn't seen. "Some thoughts don't need to be kept," the crane says. "They just need to be witnessed." Another guest is trying the steamed plum daydream therapy. She's surrounded by 3 sleepy raccoons humming in unison. A small chalkboard flips around on its own and reads, "Tonight's special, decaf existence with hints of maybe." No one questions it. "Want to add something to the menu?" The crane offers. You think a moment. Then you whisper. Soft apology soak, for when you can't say it out loud. The scroll glows. A new line appears instantly. Somewhere, a lantern shaped like a heart not yet fully folded lights up. You feel the robe nudge you gently toward a corner of the room where steam billows in lazy spirals. The path is marked by tiny, flickering lanterns, each one softly exhaling little puffs of lavender-scented mist. You follow naturally because when a robe has better time management skills than you listen. At the center of the room stands someone familiar. Or rather, something. He's a regular, apparently. Known simply as Mr. Mist, a middle-aged human-shaped fog with impeccable manners and absolutely no fixed outline. He waves, or attempts, till you can't quite tell where the hand ends and the rest begins. "Good evening," he hums, his voice like warm breath on a cold window. "I seem to have overmissed it. That's putting it mildly." Mr. Mist is now a fully enveloped being of permanent gentle fog. His towel hovers nearby like a confused bird, unsure where to land. A tea tray drifts alongside him, occasionally bumping his shoulder with affectionate clinks. Kiko flaps over, carrying a small fan and a bottle labeled Essence of Definition. She fans him with professional delicacy. It doesn't help. He fogs right back up. "No use," she sighs. He reached enlightenment by accident during a steam facial last month. You raise a brow. "That's a thing." The crane nods gravely. "Only if you fall asleep during step forward and dream about clouds that forgive you." You ask if Mr. Mist minds the change. He chuckles. "Honestly, I feel amazing. Can't remember where my knees are. Highly recommend." Behind him, a sign swings gently. Caution, low visibility, but high emotional clarity. A raccoon bumps into a wall and apologizes to it. The wall accepts. One of the tea kettles begins whistling a lullaby. The melody sounds familiar until it shifts keys halfway through and becomes a soothing apology in musical form. You exhale without realizing you were holding your breath. A guest enters, startled. "Oh no," she whispers. "Is the fog contagious?" Kiko pats her paw reassuringly. "Only if you're overdue for a deep exhale." As if on cue, the room breathes together. Even the walls seem to relax. A nearby lantern hiccups and emits the scent of roasted chestnuts and melancholy. Everyone nods in approval. Mr. Mist shares his favorite treatment, the abstract nap. No bed, no pillow, just the idea of rest made real by strong suggestion. You're intrigued. The crane leads you to a floor mat embroidered with swirls of stitched moonlight. Lie down, she says softly, and think about the nap you haven't taken since last autumn. You do. And it happens. The nap. It folds around you like old comfort, like a page in a forgotten book that still smells of ink and answers. You wake later, earlier, to find a small tag tied to your finger. It reads, "You were here briefly." It mattered. A thoughtful touch. Mr. Mist drifts by, leaving behind the smell of chamomile and afterthoughts. "Careful," he says. "If you get too calm, you'll start floating too." You glance down. Your heels are still on the mat, but your thoughts? They're several inches off the floor, trying to remember if birds dream in color. The crane smiles. "Don't worry. The workshop is grounded." Mostly, and somewhere behind you, the tea kettles begin humming again. This time, it's a duet. A low, deliberate rumble nudges you out of your nap. Not aggressive, not angry, just annoyed. Like an ancient stomach grumbling politely at an under-seasoned lunch. You blink. The room hasn't changed, but something beneath it has. A faint tremor rolls through the wooden floorboards. No more alarming than a cat stretching across a sunbeam, but enough to make the lanterns flicker ever so slightly offbeat. Kiko tilts her head. "Oh dear," she says, fluffing her feathers with slight exasperation. "The mountain's sulking again." You sit up slowly. "The mountain is sulking?" She nods, already gliding toward a wall adorned with flower-pressed wind chimes and mood pebbles. "Yes. It does that when it thinks we're not respecting its restful ambience." You stare at the ceiling as if it might blink back at you. "So, the mountain has preferences?" "Oh, absolutely," Kiko replies, unfurling a scroll labeled Passive-Aggressive Topography, Volume 3. It prefers soft footfalls, no shrieking laughter, and definitely no competitive tea-slurping contests after 9 p.m. There's another small tremor. A few grains of lavender salt fall off a nearby shelf with theatrical precision. Kiko sighs. That's its way of sighing dramatically. You ask what brought this on. She gestures to a loud guest currently snoring in a sunbeam while wearing a novelty robe that says "Steam me up, baby," in embroidered gold. The mountain groans again. The crane clears her throat, selects a tiny tuning fork from a drawer labeled Soothing Vibrations Only, and gives it a gentle tap. The sound is barely audible, like the memory of a bell, but the effect is immediate. The tremor pauses, thoughtful. "See," she says, "mountains just want to be acknowledged. Same as anyone. You feel a little guilty. You hadn't said thank you to the mountain at all. I recommend a whisper offering," she adds, handing you a tiny cup of mint vapor. "Just a few words of gratitude." Into the steam. You do. You close your eyes and thank the mountain for holding you up, for warming the waters, for not rolling you into a gully. The steam rises with your words, curling into symbols that look suspiciously like a shrug followed by a thumbs up. The mountain rumbles again, but this time it's a satisfied purr. A lantern nearby gives off a single happy pop of blue light. A stone turtle slides out from under a bench and gives you a nod of approval. First time, it asks. You nod. It remembers who thanks it, the turtle says before disappearing beneath the floorboards. Later, Kiko gifts you a badge, Mountain Approved, Level 1. It's made from pressed moss and affection. You pin it to your robe. It feels heavier than it looks, like responsibility, or maybe just moss with ambition. A fox spirit glides by, whispering, "Don't let it go to your head. I've been trying to get to level 2 for 8 decades. You smile politely, unsure if you're being challenged or welcomed. Either way, the ground beneath you feels more forgiving. The warmth of the spring more inviting. The air itself, hums like a melody just for you. From deep within the earth, the mountain seems to sigh content for now. You wake to the sound of something, rewinding. It's subtle at first, like time gently scratching its chin. The birds outside chirp in reverse, leaves that had fallen seem to rise gently back into their branches, and your robe, which you're quite sure had been loosely tied, is suddenly perfectly folded again and back on the hanger. Kiko appears at your side with a look of polite confusion and a cup of tea that smells vaguely like nostalgia. I think, she says, the new massage chair may have gone a bit too far. You glance behind her to see a strange contraption pulsing softly in a corner. It hums like a lullaby played backward through warm water. There's a guest sitting in it, only he's younger. Not dramatically. Just about 200 years or so. His hair is glossy black again, his beard reduced to a confident smudge of stubble. He's blinking rapidly, holding a pamphlet upside down. I was just here for my usual shoulder tune-up, he says, dazed. Now I think I remember what I had for lunch in 1324. You ask Kiko how the chair works. Oh, the usual, she says breezily. Pressure points, reverse acupuncture, and a little relic we borrowed from Kronos' storage closet. She opens a wooden drawer labeled absolutely not for temporal use and quickly closes it again. Let's just say the massage involves retroactive comfort. The younger guest begins to glow faintly, his clothes morphing into traditional robes from 3 dynasties ago. But won't this mess things up, you whisper? Kiko shrugs. Scholars still argue whether time is linear or just incredibly indecisive. She pats the guest gently on the forehead with a lavender-scented towel. Don't worry, she tells him. You'll re-age by dinner time. He looks mildly alarmed. Do I get to keep the knees? That's a maybe. Just then, a duck waddles in with a clipboard and squints at the guest. Your rejuvenation window has expired, the duck says in a startlingly bureaucratic tone. Please proceed to the re-wrinkling tent. The guest sighs, stands, and stretches with youthful grace before wobbling slightly. Worth it, he mumbles and follows the duck. Kiko turns to you. You'd be surprised how many folks accidentally become teenagers again. One time, we had to start a daycare. You sit in the chair, cautiously. It vibrates beneath you with a purring hum, and your mind fills with the scent of your first childhood nap. You see flashes of forgotten dreams, one involving a teapot that gave advice in riddles. You open your eyes to find a tiny name tag on your lap that reads you, but slightly improved. A breeze wafts through the room, full of whispers in a dialect you're sure you once knew. Would you like to reverse the last hour of mistakes? The chair murmurs gently. You consider it. But honestly, your last hour involved mint tea, moss slippers, and being politely tolerated by a time-sensitive duck. You decide to keep it. Kiko nods approvingly. Growth, she says, pouring you a cup of jasmine and acceptance. You sip. The steam smells like a memory you didn't know you misplaced. You're not ready for what Kiko unveils next. She gestures with all the exaggerated poise of a stage magician and throws open a sliding screen made of rice paper and cherry wood hinges. Behind it lies what appears to be a training room, except instead of swords or scrolls, there are dozens of delicately arranged bamboo slippers, and they are all mismatched. Welcome, she announces solemnly, to bamboo slipper yoga. You blink. I thought that was a typo. You whisper. Kiko raises one elegant eyebrow. Absolutely not. This is one of our most requested misunderstandings. The room is filled with tranquil flute music, the scent of green tea foam, and a suspiciously high number of overturned teapots shaped like frogs. A few guests are already here, balancing unsteadily on their bamboo footwear, holding teacups mid-air while muttering affirmations like, I am as bendy as a reed. I am as balanced as my checkbook used to be. You are handed a pair of the infamous slippers. These are left and left, the attendant says, handing you two identical shoes. Good luck. You try to stand. Immediately, you trip. But it's not a harsh fall. It's more like a very slow, intentional descent into a floor cushion that was somehow already there waiting for you, smelling faintly of vanilla and old proverbs. Kiko giggles lightly from the corner. That's the enlightenment part. It's not about balance. It's about the fall. One guest is attempting to do downward crane, which involves flapping gently while sipping from a straw. Another is in what appears to be cat stretch meets accordion, and there's a full-on philosophical discussion happening between two participants about whether falling forward counts as spiritual progress. You ask what the point of this yoga is. Kiko replies, it's to stretch the body, yes, but also to confuse the ego so completely that it gives up trying to look impressive. That checks out. You breathe in. The scent of sandalwood and steamed tofu fills the air. A wind chime dings out a note that sounds suspiciously like a burp. And then it happens. Your right foot, slipper and all, slides forward in the most graceful, unintentional split you've ever done. There's no pain, just a soft puff of flour from a meditation bun you accidentally landed on. Everyone claps politely. Someone whispers, master level. Scholars still argue whether enlightenment is best achieved through silence, stillness, or repeated ankle twisting. Kiko says as she gently helps you up. A mirror nearby has written on it in steam. You did not fail. You simply reclined assertively. Feeling somewhat victorious and very stretched, you find your way to a pile of complimentary warm shoulder stones and drape one across each limb. The stones purr. Not vibrate, purr. Nearby, a crane wearing glasses teaches a small group how to exhale into their eyebrows. Someone falls over in slow motion and doesn't stop until they're fully horizontal and snoring. You sip water flavored with exactly one blueberry and a haiku. And for the first time in hours, your left knee stops clicking. The slippers are returned to their shelf with ceremony, and you exit the yoga room slightly more noodle than person. Kiko meets you at the sliding door, hands you a chilled towel that smells like cucumber and minor regret, and says, you're just in time for the Lantern Workshop's most baffling mystery. You're intrigued. Your towel is mildly apprehensive. She guides you down a spiral path lined with little mossy stones that whisper motivational phrases when you step on them. You're glowing. Nice ankles. You look very emotionally hydrated today. At the base of the path stands a carved doorway framed by stacks of smooth, scented pebbles, hundreds of them. Or rather, it should be hundreds. Today, the stacks are uneven, and the pebbles are noticeably sparse. Kiko frowns dramatically. They're disappearing again. You peer closer. Disappearing. She nods gravely. Yes, every week or so, about 20 of them vanish. Always the smoothest, most chamomile-scented ones. Never the boring ones. It's like they have taste. A hand-painted sign nearby reads, please do not rearrange the sacred stack unless you are fully emotionally stable. Have you considered they might be sentient? You ask. Don't be absurd, Kiko replies. We tried that. One pebble got a part-time job, then ghosted us. She leads you to the lantern scenting room, where a half-dozen guests are crafting candlelit lanterns using leaves dipped in jasmine dew and gossip from local sparrows. Everyone's very focused. One guest accidentally sniffs too deeply and slips into a memory of their third-grade math teacher wearing flip-flops. And then it happens. A guest screams politely. The pebbles. They're gone again. Indeed, the small bowl labeled for scented stone calming rituals only is empty. In its place, a single pine needle and a tiny smug note. Thanks. You raise an eyebrow. Who's S? Kiko looks grim. We think it's squirrel. You blink. A squirrel, she clarifies. A very well-organized squirrel. Probably the one that runs the Moonlight Acorn Exchange down by the forest slope. I suspect sparrelated smuggling. A guest nearby whispers, "Is it illegal?" Kiko tilts her head. Hard to say. There are no actual laws governing aromatherapeutic mineral theft. Just etiquette. The guests start a mild discussion about what counts as mineral ethics while someone suggests offering the squirrel a trade. One tiny massage per pebble returned. Another proposes building a decoy stash full of fake pebbles made from lavender wax and plausible deniability. Yusa, has anyone seen this squirrel? Kiko pulls out a sketch. It's just an incredibly buff squirrel, wearing a little towel, with a clipboard. Scholars still argue whether this is an artist's impression or an actual portrait, she notes. One thing's for sure. This squirrel knows spa value. You spot a few new pebbles hidden suspiciously behind a bonsai. They're trembling slightly, clearly traumatized. One whispers, "We saw things." You rescue them gently, placing them into a nearby tea saucer for emotional debriefing. And somewhere far off in the forest, a tiny squirrel sneezes, rolls over in a bed made of pebbles, and dreams of lavender-scented domination. You, meanwhile, start folding small welcome cards for the returning stones. Each one reads, "You were missed. You are valid. You are exfoliating in spirit." And as you tape them to the stone stacks, one particularly smooth pebble starts to hum very softly, like it's purring, or perhaps laughing. Hard to say. Later that evening, after the pebble panic has simmered into a simmering gossip stew, Kiko leans conspiratorially close and whispers, "You're invited to something special tonight. It's not on the spa schedule." You follow her through the lantern-lit hallways, past tea-scented corridors, and beneath a wind chime that only plays on Tuesdays. She leads you to a discreet bamboo door, behind which soft murmurs rise and fall like someone dreaming in a musical key. Inside is a small tatami room lit by firefly lanterns. At the center, two cushions. One is occupied by Kiko, already sitting cross-legged with a wide grin. The other belongs to a fox. A real fox, wearing eyeliner. He or she, it's not clear, adjusts a silk scarf, gives you an approving once-over, and says in a voice like honey poured over sarcasm, finally, "Someone with decent slippers." You blink. "Thanks. I'm Hoshiko," the fox says, gesturing with a flick of their tail. "Star child, gossip aficionado, karaoke champion. Don't ask me about the third one unless you really want to know." Kiko claps her hands. It's time. From a nearby drawer, she produces two microphones. Tiny ones. You stare. "Is this karaoke?" "It's whispered karaoke," Hoshiko corrects. Everything's sung at less than a whisper. It's the most relaxing form of competitive music. Loser has to make midnight tea for the winner. Also, Kiko adds helpfully, the tea must be made while complimenting the winners for pattern or sandal selection. You reluctantly take your mic. Fine. "What's the first song?" "The Ballad of the Sleepy Turtle," says Hoshiko. A classic. Very low tempo. Inspired by a turtle who once yawned so hard he broke time. You sing. Well, you whisper sing. It's hauntingly calming. Kiko's verse is somehow a lullaby wrapped in fog. Hoshiko's falsetto whisper makes your toenails feel vaguely like warm tofu. By the second verse, you're all glancing dreamily at the floor, unsure whether you've transcended or just forgotten the rules of grammar. The final note fades like a memory of mist. Kiko dozes off mid-bow. Hoshiko claps exactly once, then announces, "It's a tie. We both win. You make the tea. You don't even argue." You brew a delicate oolong, sprinkle in a few petals that smell like old lullabies and polite giggles, and pour 3 cups. Hoshiko toast to secrets sung too softly to understand. Hiko raises her teacup to foxes who duel without claws. You to whatever this was, and to sleeping well afterward. Somewhere outside, a bamboo wind chime makes a confused noise, as if unsure whether this was a spa event or an auditory hallucination. Back in your room, you lie down and hear faint traces of Hoshiko humming a lullaby through the walls. It sounds like someone singing directly into a pillow made of nostalgia. You wonder if this was real. Then you hear a soft voice outside your window whisper, "Nice slippers," and then silence. You wake to the sound of thunder. Not the loud crash through the sky kind, but more like a heavy celestial footstep, echoing gently through the clouds with the politeness of someone trying not to wake the neighbors. Peeking through the window, you notice that the horizon is smudged with a watercolor wash of gray and silver. Rain clouds are gathering like distant relatives arriving unannounced, but with good intentions. In the courtyard, Kiko is already there, clutching an absurdly tiny parasol made of folded leaves. She waves you over as if this were the most normal thing in the world. "He's coming." "Ooh." She points upward. "The weather dragon." Name's Kamoji. He's very punctual about unscheduled spa inspections. You squint up at the sky, and yep, there he is. A long, serpentine dragon made entirely of clouds, fluffy, slow-moving, slightly sulky-looking. His whiskers stretch out like drifting smoke, and his expression reads somewhere between bored meteorologist and retired wind god who writes tea reviews. He lands with the grace of a sleepy feather and coils himself around the reflecting pool like a massive plush scarf. A rumble from his throat. "Greetings, Hiko boss." You bow. You're not entirely sure how deeply to bow to a dragon made of condensed weather, so you just sort of crouch apologetically and hope for the best. Kamoji's eyes narrow, as if judging your foot placement. Then he speaks again, voice curling like fog. "The spa is satisfactory, but there have been reports of rain etiquette violations." You blink. "Rain etiquette?" He nods. "Too much casual splashing. One guest danced barefoot in puddles without asking the clouds for consent. Umbrella collisions. And someone used a sacred mist pocket to steam their dumplings." Hiko looks mortified. "That was for a friend." Kamoji raises an eyebrow-shaped wisp. "But," he says, coiling tighter, "I'm a fair auditor. We shall begin the rain harmony protocol." You whisper to Kiko, "Is that real?" She shrugs. "It is now." And so begins the spa-wide workshop on proper drizzle appreciation. Everyone is issued a complimentary rain bell, a small charm that rings only when hit by the softest raindrop. Guests tiptoe through mist trails, practicing respectful sighs and properly timed umbrella flourishes. The spa transforms into a ballet of quiet water worship. Kamoji observes from the rooftop, sipping dew from a teacup made of morning breath and moonlight. You pass a group of ducks in tiny raincoats, nodding solemnly as they waddle in line. A tree whispers, "This is deeply soothing." Hours later, Kamoji floats down for the final inspection. He inspects the rain bells. They chime in synchronized approval. He sniffs the air, smells like lavender clouds, and polite applause. "Acceptable," he says. Then, with a swirl of his tail and a chuckle made of wind, he ascends into the sky, leaving behind a single raindrop that politely taps your nose before vanishing into steam. Hiko sighs in relief. "We passed." You nod. "Didn't even know we were being graded." That's how all the best spa rituals start. The sky clears. The wind carries the faint scent of approval. You nap beneath a sunbeam that has just enough warmth to be flattering. There's a curious buzz drifting through the tea shop this morning. Not the literal kind. There are no bees here, unless you count the one that occasionally visits to rate the floral arrangements, but a metaphysical sort of buzz. The kind of energy that says something slightly absurd is about to happen, and it may involve paperwork. You're in the back room, arranging teacups by emotional resonance. Happy cups go on the top shelf, slightly melancholic ones near the herbal teas, when Kiko bursts in, looking like a scroll that's just discovered it's overdue. "We got our first bad review," she whispers, eyes wide. You blink. "That's not so bad, right?" Kiko holds up a crumpled parchment. On it, in perfectly polite brushstrokes. "Too calming. Stayed for 12 years. Forgot to leave." What? You stare. "Is that a complaint?" She nods gravely. "Apparently his cat ran for local office while he was napping here. The cat won." You sit down. "So, we're being blamed for a cat mayor?" Kiko nods again. "A very competent cat, apparently. Introduced traffic-free zones and tuna subsidies." You pinch the bridge of your nose. "Okay." Deep breath. "What do we do?" Kiko produces a brush. "Respond." You glance at the message again. It doesn't sound angry. Just a very sleepy. So you compose a reply. "Dear Y, thank you for your feedback. We deeply regret your unintended civic absence. Complimentary tea will be provided upon your next visit. Please bring the cat. Yours in steam and serenity, Whisper Lantern Workshop." Kiko beams. "That's perfect." Word spreads. Within hours, there's a queue of guests asking if the workshop causes productive life detours. Some hope to miss tax season. Others just want a break from small talk. A new treatment is born, the intentional pause. It involves a blanket woven from size, a teacup that slowly refills with moonlight, and a sign that reads, "You are temporarily unimportant, and that's okay." People adore it. One guest leaves a glowing review. "Forgot my name. Recalled it 5 days later, and it sounded new again." 10 out of 10. Scholars still argue whether this counts as time travel or simply excellent marketing. Back in the workshop, Kiko frames the original bad review. She places it on the wall, beside a photo of the cat mayor in a sash. "Balance," she says, sipping from a cup labeled mildly confused jasmine. You smile. "The only 1-star review that made us a 5-star retreat." Outside, clouds shuffle lazily. A bell chimes without being touched. Somewhere in the distance, a cat debates zoning laws with a turtle. And inside, you settle into a chair that slowly hugs you back. You're polishing a lantern shaped like a sleeping koi when Kiko rushes in again, this time with her tail fluffed out like she just saw a ghost sneeze. "They're gone," she gasps. You pause mid-polish. "Who's gone?" "The sacred loofahs." You stare at her. "We have sacred loofahs. They were behind a meditation shelf, in the basket labeled, 'Do not touch unless you seek softness beyond comprehension.'" You slowly set the lantern down. "This is serious." The sacred loofahs were a gift from an ancient river deity, woven from moss, river foam, and existential dread. They hummed softly when in proximity to deep relaxation, and once made a guest dream about being a philosophical mushroom for 3 straight days. Naturally, their disappearance prompts a full investigation. You and Kiko create a suspect board, complete with doodles of possible culprits. The bamboo ghost with exfoliation envy, the frog with suspiciously smooth elbows, a raccoon seen doing yoga near the supply room. After some light interrogation involving chrysanthemum tea and a nap-themed board game, the trail leads you to the cliffs behind the shop. There, illuminated by early moonlight, you find them. Not stolen, not misplaced, leading a cult. Dozens of the sacred loofahs have arranged themselves in a spiral formation. At the center is a particularly large loofah, wearing a crown of mint leaves. They vibrate gently in rhythm. Loofah chanting, Kiko whispers. Nearby, Forest creatures sit in quiet reverence. A deer is meditating. A hedgehog offers a pebble as tribute. You take a cautious step forward. One loofah spins toward you and emits a barely audible squeak. You translate this as "you may enter," but only if you understand fluffiness is a state of mind. You do not understand, but you nod solemnly. Kiko boss. We mean no disrespect. We just miss their exfoliating insight. The lead loofah pauses, then hops into your hands. The rest follow, like an adorable parade of sentient sponges. They return willingly, but under one condition. They now require their own meditation hour every evening, complete with incense and sea cucumber poetry readings. Back at the tea shop, you install a loofah lounge. It's a hit. Guests report dreams of becoming bathwater philosophers. One guest insists a loofah whispered stock tips in her sleep. She now owns a successful goat farm. Scholars still argue whether the loofahs are enchanted or just highly organized. You, meanwhile, tuck them in each night. And for the first time in weeks, the hot water sings. Later that same week, while rearranging your teacup shelf alphabetically by emotional tone, you accidentally knock loose a tile in the shop's rear floor. You expect a creak. Maybe some dust. What you get is a whisper. Not wind. Not pipe groan. A whisper. Specifically, steep longer, stir counterclockwise, avoid goat milk. You blink. What? The tile hums faintly. You press your ear to it. Welcome, proprietor. You have discovered the ancient bath talisman. You sit back. Of course I have. Kiko peeks in. Are you talking to the plumbing again? It's not plumbing. It's a whispering tile. Kiko nods like this is the most normal thing she's heard all day. Cool. I'll get the translation, Moss. Soon, you and Kiko are cross-legged on the floor, communing with the bath tile, now affectionately named Shizu. Shizu shares ancient spa techniques, forgotten tea steeping spells, and one surprisingly specific recipe for lotus foam waffles. According to Shizu, your lantern workshop was built on the remnants of an old bathhouse frequented by sun spirits, moon cats, and one turtle who always forgot his sandals. You ask if that's why your sleep lanterns sometimes glow in Morse code. Yes, says Shizu. Also, you left the peppermint drawer open again. Among Shizu's secrets, lavender smoke works better with left-handed kettles. Certain tea leaves hum when you apologize to them first. And steam becomes emotionally unstable at altitudes above 800 pebbles. You begin incorporating Shizu's insights into the workshop. The results are astonishing. One guest levitates briefly while sipping lemon mist oolong. Another begins communicating with moths using only eyebrow movements. The talisman also warns you that a full moon next week may trigger lantern moodiness. You don't know what that means. You assume it involves sighing in rhythmic pulses. Kiko naturally knits the tile a little scarf. Scholars still argue whether the talisman was enchanted, sentient, or just lonely. But every night, it hums lullabies through the floorboards. And you hum along. The morning sun is sleepy and draped in pale silk as you open the workshop blinds. Today feels like it's wearing socks made of fog. As you pour your first cup of jasmine hush tea, the tea leaves don't settle. They dance, then float, then begin to spell. You blink once, twice. The letters in your cup rearrange into duck. Thursday. You glance at the calendar. It's Friday. You pour another cup. This time the tea reads, "Your guest at noon will smell of sesame and forget his name." Naturally, he arrives at 12:02, smells strongly of sesame, and calls himself Mr. Bean Crust. You don't question it. The cup speaks again and again, always oddly helpful, occasionally dramatic. When you whisper, "Are you sentient?" the tea forms a tiny shrug. You name it Tama after the sound a drop makes in a quiet cup. Tama becomes your in-house oracle. Guests begin ordering readings along with their lanterns. Will I find love? Cup swirls dramatically, forms shape of an umbrella and a fish. You say, yes, but only on rainy Tuesdays. Should I take that job in the moon department? Tea turns murky, then clears with one floating clove. You offer, you'll be okay if you bring snacks. Kiko sets up a chalkboard outside. Today's brewcasting, mostly calm with scattered epiphanies. Naturally, rumors spread. A flock of cranes from a neighboring province shows up in berets, sketchbooks in wing, muttering about avant-garde infusion narratives. You can't deny Tama has flair. At one point, the tea forms the face of your grandmother's cat. It winks. You wink back. The whispers from the talisman tile and Tama's leafy messages begin overlapping. They sometimes argue. One says more cardamom. The other insists less existential dread. You somehow manage both. Scholars still argue whether Tama was blessed by a spirit, brewed too long under a harvest moon, or simply had opinions that fermented. But from that day on, every cup had something to say. Some guests sipped for insight, others just like the gossip. You're arranging lanterns in the workshop window, soft pink, pale blue, one shaped like a disgruntled goose when you notice a robe moving without its wearer. It flutters past you, belt cinched, him brushing the floor politely. It pauses at the tea counter as if pondering today's blend, then glides to a vacant cushion, settles in with a dramatic sigh, and slouches like it's earned it. You blink. Then blink again. Nope, still robe-shaped. Still empty. You name it Sashiko because it seems like the kind of robe that mends its own feelings with tiny stitches. Later, you find it offering an extra cushion to a guest with sore knees. Then fetching tea. Then leading someone to the exact perfect nap nook beneath the hanging silk fans. Soon other robes follow. One flutters in with a permanent pout stitched into its shoulder seam. Another has the unmistakable waddle of someone who still thinks about soup they once had in 2003. They don't talk, but they express plenty with sleeve tugs, dramatic twirls, and the occasional disapproving belt flap. Your workshop is now half spa, half sentient coat closet. You add a chalkboard sign. Robes may guide you to your optimal nap experience. Please tip accordingly, cookies preferred. The guests adjust quickly. Some even request the robes by name. I'd like the one with excellent posture and passive-aggressive sash gestures. Scholars still argue whether the robes were animated by residual enchantment, ghost thread embroidery, or sheer force of hospitality. Whatever the cause, you stop questioning it the day one robe gently but firmly redirects a guest from a poor life decision using only interpretive belt twirls and an herbal compress. One evening, a robe leads you to your own favorite cushion. A steaming cup of sleepy sage tea awaits. You bow. It bows back. That night, your dreams are folded and surprisingly wrinkle-free. You wake to the sound of a soft argument. Not loud, more like two feathers having an academic disagreement in a room made of marshmallow. It's coming from the tea house courtyard, where a circle of guests sits cross-legged on woven mats, each one clutching a towel. At the center, a robe, yes, Sashiko, is gesturing with a swan-folded towel in one sleeve and a triangle-folded towel in the other. Apparently, it's debate night. The topic: can a towel truly be folded, or is folding merely a temporary illusion of form? You watch as a scholarly raccoon spirit holds up a napkin and says, "This is not a fold. It is a pause and flatness." Yes. One guest faints theatrically. A teacup tips over as if to say too much. Someone else, a sentient breeze trapped in a fan, whispers, "But what if towels fold us?" The silence that follows is the kind you can sip. You ease into a cushion, towel in hand, and feel the collective energy swirl like steam. The crane watches from the balcony above, head tilted in that way birds do when observing something both delightful and probably doomed. You try folding your towel into a lotus. It ends up looking more like a croissant having a nervous breakdown. Still, you are applauded by a robe with impeccable collar pleats. One elderly guest claims they achieved momentary enlightenment while folding a washcloth into a shape resembling a mildly surprised shrimp. Scholars still argue whether towel folding is art, philosophy, nap preparation, or all three. By the end of the debate, everyone agrees on one thing. Folding is an act of hope, a belief that things can be reshaped gently again and again. That night, you fold your worries into a neat little rectangle and tuck them under your pillow. You sleep so deeply, you dream of warm laundry. The next morning begins not with light, but with a rhythmic echoing. It's the sound of a guest dreaming too loudly. You roll over in your futon, only to see soft lanterns bobbing in the air above your head, each one glowing with a different shade of someone's dream. The culprit, a round-faced tanuki sleeping in the lotus position, snoring gently, with a grin stretched so wide it's practically philosophical. His dreams are audible, not in words, but in resonance, as if his subconscious hired a choir of monks and a waterfall to hum in harmony. You look up. Lanterns drift around the room like sleepy jellyfish. One flickers with visions of an endless rice field. Another hums with the scent of roasted chestnuts. And one, hovering just above your blanket, softly projects an image of you floating on a teacup down a moonlit river. The crane appears, silent as always, carrying a notepad in her beak. She nods toward the snoring tanuki, as if to say, "You seeing this too?" Apparently, it's not the first time this has happened. Some guests are what the staff calls dream projectors. Individuals so relaxed that their inner worlds start leaking into the decor. Normally, they're harmless. But today, the dreams are so vivid that the tea house begins responding. The scrolls on the wall rearrange themselves to match the dreamscape. A koi painting becomes a real koi pond for about 7 minutes. The floor hums. At one point, the steam kettle sings a lullaby from the guest's childhood, even though no one taught it that song. Scholars still argue whether dreaming can be contagious when infused with enough cinnamon and tranquility. A soft breeze curls through the window, and suddenly you're dreaming too, but awake. It's hard to tell which is which anymore. Eventually, the tanuki snorts awake, rubs his belly, and yawns like a gong being struck in reverse. The lanterns pop softly, like bubbles of forgotten memory. You sip some tea and decide that today you'll walk very slowly, just in case the floor remembers how to dream again. Somewhere between a hush of the bamboo grove and the mellow clinking of teacups, a curious new sound begins to echo through the lantern shop. Yawn. You blink. Then, without meaning to, you let out a soft yawn of your own. It's happening again. But this time, it's not from a tanuki or a tea blend. It's from an orchestra. An orchestra of yawns. You step quietly into the back garden, where the crane goddess has gathered a peculiar ensemble. A tortoise with a timpani-sized shell, a chorus of mossy frogs in harmonic nap mode, and a small gust of wind that loops in circles like a sleepy metronome. At the center sits a hedgehog wearing tiny reading glasses, tapping a stick gently on a hollowed gourd. It begins, one long yawn from the hedgehog, cascading into a domino of yawns across the ensemble. Each yawn is perfectly timed, stretching into notes and rhythms. One starts low and rumbly, like distant thunder. Another loops upward like a warm breeze lifting a curtain. Together, they form a yawn symphony. You sit beside the koi pond and feel your eyelids droop in rhythm with the lulling acoustics. The crane, never one for grand gestures, simply tilts her head, listening intently. She fluffs her feathers to match the tempo. No one claps when the performance ends because everyone is either too relaxed or already asleep. One frog remains wide-eyed, possibly in awe, possibly because it forgot how to blink. Scholars still debate whether the yawn symphony was composed or just naturally happened after a particularly heavy lunch. The sheet music, if it ever existed, was likely napped on and forgotten. Later, the crane carefully bottles some of the sound in translucent jars, labeling them for difficult evenings. You try to leave, but your legs feel like pudding, and your brain has turned to chamomile. You give up and sink into a moss cushion shaped like a comma. A comma, not a period. Because here, rest is not an end, just a pause. It begins with a whisper, not a mystical one, but a paper one. A soft flutter, then another, then 30 more. Like sleepy snowflakes, scrolls begin to rain gently from the sky. You look up. The clouds have parted to reveal not the sun, but an office. Or rather, what appears to be a celestial bureaucracy, glowing clerks with feathered pens, lounging on clouds that smell faintly of ink and lavender. One of them, wearing spectacles made of star glass, peers down and sighs. Paperwork, they mutter. Soon, the lantern shop is buried ankle-deep in gently spiraling forms. Some ask for lantern permits. Others request spa vouchers for divine beings. One just says, "Would you like to opt out of time?" The crane goddess, entirely unbothered, retrieves her antique paperweight, which is just a sleeping cat that refuses to move, and begins sorting. You're handed a scroll titled Declaration of Midnap Intent. Beneath it, optional dream themes checklist and consent to be gently tucked in. You fill in your preferred dream colors, lavender fog, maybe a few floating peach slices, sign with a yawn, and place it into a wicker basket labeled things the moon will probably ignore. Scholars still argue whether the celestial bureaucracy actually governs anything, or if it simply enjoys pushing metaphysical paper around. One god once claimed that 3,000 years of divine action were reversed because someone forgot to initial a stardust invoice. The scrolls eventually fold themselves into tiny origami birds, flapping gently as they file into rows on the shelves. One stares at you. You stare back. It blinks. You blink. It wins. The crane's assistant, a turtle with a monocle and absolutely no sense of urgency, stamps each scroll with a paw print and mutters approvingly. Soon, everything is in order. Well, not order exactly. More like a soft, purring bureaucracy of peace. The ground hums softly, like a cat's purr turned seismic. You feel it before you hear it. A low, slow groan from beneath the earth, as if the mountain itself is stretching after a particularly long nap. Lanterns sway gently. The kettle on the stove gives a sympathetic rattle. Even the wind pauses, unsure whether to panic or brew more tea. Then the crane goddess whispers, "Oh, not again." You look to the far side of the mountain. The whole slope is tipping ever so slightly to the left. A pebble rolls past your foot. Then another. Then a chair. Then the tea-drinking tanuki in the chair, still sipping, utterly unbothered. The mountain is trying to tip over. Apparently, it does this every few centuries. Not out of malice, just boredom. See, when gods and goblins and cranes build too many cozy corners and floaty lantern things on one side of a hill, the balance gets snoozy. Scholars still argue whether the tilt is geological, metaphorical, or emotional. But either way, the solution is always the same. Everyone must calmly, sleepily migrate to the other side. No running, no shouting, just quiet shuffling and polite yawning. The spa-goers grab their tea trays. The lanterns float in dreamy zigzags. A particularly lazy cloud mutters, 5 more minutes, and has to be carried. You help relocate the enchanted bathrobe rack. One robe insists it was in the middle of folding itself into a goose. Another accuses you of wrinkling its aura. You apologize. It forgives you. The crane goddess, with effortless grace, floats across the air and places a giant porcelain cat statue, solid, unblinking, incredibly smug, on the opposite slope to counterbalance the mood. Slowly, the mountain settles. Balance restored. Teacups upright. The wind resumes humming. The crane gives you a wink. "That's gravity for you," she says, then returns to pouring tea like nothing ever happened. A leaf drifts lazily onto your head. You brush it off. Another lands on your shoulder. Then a third on your knee, this one neatly folded into a tiny five-pointed star. Curious. Then the whispering starts. It's not spooky. It's more like polite applause, but from trees. You peer outside the lantern shop to find a committee of forest beings forming a slow, spiraling parade toward the door. Leading them is a wide-eyed owl holding a clipboard made of bark, wearing a tiny badge labeled Forest Council of Ambience and Comfort. Behind it, squirrels in vests, frogs in robes, and a raccoon dragging a glittery stamp pad. You step aside as the parade marches in. They don't knock. They never knock. The crane goddess bows slightly. "Audit time?" she asks. The owl nods. 5-star leaf rating inspection. Standard protocol. They wander through the shop, measuring things like glow radiance and teapot acoustics. A gnome sniffs a cushion and faints from bliss. A pine fairy floats up to the rafters and declares them emotionally balanced. You try to help, but the raccoon tells you gently, "Let the ambience speak for itself." Scholars still argue whether the leaf rating system is objective, metaphysical, or completely random. One tale claims a spa received 6 leaves once, but it was a clerical error caused by a drunk hedgehog. As the evaluation ends, the owl gathers the council and clears its throat. In accordance with forest traditions, it intones, and pursuant to the regulations of woodland tranquility, it pauses for drama. You hold your breath. This establishment is hereby awarded a full 5-leaf rating. With twinkle distinction, a small burst of floral confetti erupts from somewhere behind the tea jars. The raccoon salutes with its whole face. The frog orchestra begins humming the "You Did It" lullaby in a minor key. The crane doesn't smile exactly, but you see her tail feathers fluff ever so slightly. You hear them before you see them. A gentle, squishy patter. Then a soft quacking in harmony. Then the distinct, unmistakable flump of many webbed feet politely disregarding personal boundaries. The ducks have arrived. It starts with 3 dignified, elderly mallards in tiny towels. They nod at you, as if you were expected. Then 37 more. Then at least 200, yellow, white, speckled, glowing faintly with bioluminescent halos. They waddle in as if they own the place. One stops to adjust the temperature of the footbath. Another flaps into the ceiling beams, hangs upside down, and nods approvingly. The crane looks up from polishing a floating teacup. "It's migration season," she murmurs. "But why here, you ask?" The crane turns slowly. "Because this spa has the most symmetrical puddles north of Mount Hashigami." You nod. It makes sense. Sort of. The ducks settle in with military efficiency. They form neat rows in the herb garden. They convert the lantern drying area into a communal steam nap zone. One of them commandeers a teapot and begins serving silent tea to other ducks. Another sits atop the cash register, scribbling in a ledger with one wing and a leaf quill. Scholars still debate whether this migration is instinctual, enchanted, or just excellent PR. One record found in a moss-covered scroll references a Quacktober wellness retreat, but it was mostly illegible and smelled like cucumber water. Soon the entire mountain hums with soft duck sounds. Not a single quack is louder than a whisper. A junior lantern apprentice, who'd only ever seen one duck in her life, collapses with joy into a beanbag of lotus petals. The ducks surround her, fan her gently with cedar leaves, and then resume their spa takeover. Eventually, the crane sighs, lays down her polishing cloth, and raises one wing. Effective immediately, she says, all tea services shall be conducted in duck time. You're not sure what duck time is, but you're oddly okay with it. You try to ask what duck time means, but the ducks are already 2 steps ahead. Within minutes, signs appear across the spa. Duck time equals nowish, all appointments subject to feather drift, and paddle with purpose. Each sign is written in soft charcoal ink, accented with plum blossoms, and smells faintly of mint. You're ushered by a team of enthusiastic ducklings into a new area you didn't know existed, a cloud hammock therapy pavilion. Nestled in a hidden bamboo grove, dozens of silken hammocks float gently in midair, suspended not by ropes or poles, but by clouds. Actual clouds. The soft, slow-moving kind that whisper through sky poems and occasionally smell like steamed rice. You step into one. Well, you're sort of lifted into it by 2 ducks and a very pushy breeze. The cloud settles beneath you with a sigh. It's softer than silk, cooler than moonlight, and somehow smells like the memory of a nap you once took when you were 7. You float. Not high, just slightly above the mossy ground. Enough to feel weightless but grounded by the sound of distant teapots and the occasional duck sneeze. Above you, bamboo leaves wave lazily. Below, a tiny fox is writing haikus in the dirt with its tail. You drift, and soon you're not entirely sure where your limbs end and the mist begins. Somewhere in the distance, the crane is reciting a calming recipe for lemon chrysanthemum tea to a group of starling tourists. One guest suggests adding honey, and she gives a silent, approving nod, then immediately forgets who said it, as is her way. As you rock in a hammock, words begin to float around your head, actual words, drifting like sleepy fireflies. Sip, float, exhale, nap responsibly. One duck drapes a cool towel across your forehead and whispers, drifting is an art form. Scholars continue to debate whether the cloud hammocks were a divine gift or just particularly well-trained weather. Either way, you're definitely not getting up anytime soon. At some unmarked hour, possibly tomorrow, possibly yesterday, you find yourself sitting in a sun-dappled nook of the tea shop, watching the crane quietly rearrange a stack of napkins. She pauses mid-fold, stares at the paper square in her claws, then lets out the softest of sighs. I used to command moonlight, she mutters, not bitterly, but like someone recalling an old hobby. Now I fold corners and drizzle honey. And just like that, the crisis of purpose begins. You're not sure whether to offer her tea or existential reassurance, so you just nod and pretend to inspect a pebble. It looks back at you with quiet judgment, which doesn't help. The crane paces softly. She tries sweeping the floor, but the broom keeps rearranging the dust into motivational phrases like, "You got this," and "refill the loose leaf." I was once worshipped, she continues. There were temples, priests, bronze statues, a festival that involved exactly 37 floating lanterns and one enormous beetle parade. Now, guests ask if we offer oat milk. You offer her a lotus cookie. She declines, then accepts, then debates the symbolism of baked petals. Around the shop, time seems to pause. A sugar spoon spins on its own. A cat blinks in slow-mo. The squirrel begins and abandons 3 novels in succession. I'm not just a feathered barista, she murmurs. I once turned a river into a harp. It played itself every spring. Now, my greatest trick is convincing a guest that warm towels count as magic. Scholars still argue whether divine burnout is an official mythological phase or just an ancient version of Wednesday. The The crane stands dramatically atop a stool. "I shall retire," she declares, as though an invisible audience is present. "I shall become something simple. Something still." You ask what that is. "Moss," she says, with the utmost serenity. Then she climbs down, carefully selects the mossiest rock in the garden, and curls into it like she's folding herself into silence. The spa continues as normal. Guests sip. Ducks quack. But for the next 3 days, the crane moves not an inch. And somehow the tea tastes even better. On the 4th day, just as a guest begins to wonder whether the mossy rock in the corner has always been shaped like a sleeping crane, something unusual happens. The teacups sigh. Not the guests. Not the staff. The actual ceramic teacups. One exhales a gentle puff of steam and mutters, "She's awake." The moss shifts. One feather twitches. Then, with the languid stretch of someone who has napped across multiple lunar phases, the crane rises. "I dreamed I was a fern," she whispers, eyes still half-lidded. "And I was incredibly hydrated." Guests clap politely. The bamboo wind chimes rattle a celebratory rhythm. Somewhere, a gong gongs itself once and then apologizes for being too enthusiastic. The crane boasts, "I have returned from my brief retirement. I bring with me a new insight. Life is better with snacks and silence." And so, with newfound clarity and an actual sprig of moss still clinging to her wing, she resumes her post behind the counter, only this time with a contented glow and an inexplicably moss-scented aura. Just as she begins to brew her first post-retirement pot of jasmine tea, a tiny bell rings at the front door. A robe glides in. You heard that right, a robe. It floats gently on a non-existent breeze, its fabric embroidered with mysterious loops and spirals. It doesn't speak, but somehow communicates, "I'm here for enlightenment and possibly cookies." The crane nods solemnly. "Of course." Then come the others. Robes of all sizes. Silky, scratchy, monochrome, paisley. Some arrive walking on air, others lounging on invisible recliners, all drifting in like invited thoughts. The sacred loofah cult whispers a guest in awe, hiding behind a menu that lists sage-scented steam as today's special. Yes, they've returned. And this time, they've brought uniforms. Each robe bears a delicate symbol, the stylized spiral of steam around a teacup. Their leader, a particularly plush robe with golden tassels, floats forward and bows to the crane. "We have found the true meaning of exfoliation," it says in a voice like warm laundry. "We are ready to share it." The crane doesn't blink. She simply gestures to the empty cushions. Tea first. Philosophy second. The cult robes nod as one and settle down, folding themselves in perfect lotus positions. One begins humming. Another gently emits the scent of eucalyptus. Scholars still argue whether this was the world's first textile-based spiritual movement or just an unusually hygienic flash mob. Either way, the tea shop is now fully booked. The moon is fat and full, hanging low like a sleepy eye above the lantern shop. Its glow seeps through every paper window and floats along the stone paths like spilled milk. Inside, a hush has settled so completely that even the dust has chosen to float slower. And then, just outside, the pines begin to sway. At first, you think it's the wind. But there is no wind. Not even a breath of it. One pine dips. Another bows. The third spins in a gentle arc, needles shivering not in fear, but in rhythm. They're dancing. You step outside to watch. The robes follow. The teacups line up along the sill. The trees, those tall and solemn sentinels of the mountain, have decided that tonight they are the music. With each step of their roots, slow, deliberate, strangely graceful, the lanterns above the shop begin to swing. First in time, then in harmony. Soft percussion begins. It's not drums exactly. More like the sound of falling petals, of tea leaves brushing the side of a kettle, of someone yawning politely from very far away. And into this quiet crescendo, the crane steps forward. She doesn't speak. She doesn't flutter. She simply moves. One slow step, then another. She dips her head toward the leading pine, and in response, its needles shimmer with moonlight. What follows isn't a dance exactly. It's a conversation with movement, a shared nap with motion, a choreography that only the extremely drowsy could invent. The guests, robes and all, join in. They sway. They shuffle. They perform the ancient ritual of not trying too hard. There are missteps and gentle collisions. Laughter, but only in whispers. A robe spins too far and softly bumps into a tree. The tree responds by gently turning to nudge the robe back into the rhythm. No one is excluded. Not the moss, not the cups, not the mirror propped against the bamboo fence, which critiques each pirouette with a muttered, not bad. You shuffle along too, caught between amusement and actual serenity. Your body moves on its own, lulled into a rhythm older than logic but newer than reason. And above, the lanterns hum, a warm, pulsing glow that mimics the rise and fall of breathing. Somewhere in the middle of the pine waltz, the guest falls asleep mid-sway. They're caught gently by a robe that folds around them like a hammock and continues to dance. The trees don't stop. Not for hours. Scholars still argue whether this was a mythic seasonal rite or a forest-wide nap-themed flash mob. But one thing is certain. Everyone slept really well afterward. The morning after the pine dance, the mountain is covered in a kind of quiet you can almost sip. Guests lounge on pebbled cushions, sipping lukewarm dreams. The robes are draped across sun-warmed rocks like sleepy jellyfish. Even the lanterns seem to dim themselves to match the hush. And that's when it speaks. The mirror. You forgot it was even there, leaning casually against the bamboo fence, occasionally fogging up from steam but never drawing attention. Today, however, its surface ripples slightly, like tea stirred by thought. You look reasonably rested, it says. You blink, then glance behind you. But no one else seems surprised. Is that mirror talking to me? You whisper. Don't flatter yourself. I talk to everyone. I just have standards. The mirror is about 3 feet tall, framed in brushed bronze, and has the personality of someone who once managed a salon but now prefers enlightenment with a side of sass. It doesn't insult. Not exactly. It delivers brutally honest compliments. Those under-eye shadows are looking deliciously mythic today. That robe color. Bold choice. You wear it like someone who hasn't read a review in years. Your aura smells faintly of jasmine and indecision. I like it. It becomes a minor attraction at the spa. Guests line up to be lightly roasted and surprisingly uplifted. One guest, a visiting deity of mild inconveniences, receives this verdict. You look like Thunder's second cousin. Not the loud one. The drizzly one. She tears up. The crane, bemused, brings the mirror a tiny parasol for shade. The mirror says, "Thank you, but you and I both know I don't wrinkle." Scholars still argue whether the mirror was enchanted by Batet herself, or if it was just particularly reflective, emotionally and literally. Regardless, its presence adds a new service to the tea shop menu. Complimentary self-esteem adjustment, with soft sarcasm included. You eventually step up, unsure what to expect. It tilts slightly, appraising, then finally says, "You're trying." And honestly, that's heroic. You don't know why that makes your chest warm, but it does. And for the rest of the day, you walk with just a bit more calm in your step. By now, the tea shop has become a living being. It breathes steam, and exhales jasmine. The guests come and go like tides, whispering, sipping, occasionally becoming fog themselves. Baudet herself is seen less frequently these days, often curled up in a sunbeam, her tail twitching with invisible dreams. And then one morning, she's gone. Not vanished exactly, just not present. In her place, a small patch of moss. Fresh, soft, glimmering slightly with dew. A wooden sign has been propped beside it in curiously elegant paw scratch. On personal leave. Currently being moss. No questions, no shoes. You stare at it. You wait. You blink. Nothing happens. The moss continues being moss. It's greener than you'd expect. Looks comfortable. You get the sense it's listening, even without ears. Scholars still debate whether this was an act of divine transformation or just extreme introversion. But the guests accept it with quiet nods. They step around a moss reverently. A tray of tea is left nearby every morning, just in case moss gets thirsty. Some say they hear a low, purring hum if they sit beside it long enough. A few of the towels fold themselves more slowly these days, as if trying to match the moss's energy. One afternoon, a fox spirit lies down next to it and doesn't speak for hours. When she finally rises, she whispers, "I needed that." Even the mirror remains respectfully silent whenever rolled past. The moss becomes a sacred site, not out of grandeur, but out of stillness. A reminder that doing absolutely nothing is sometimes the most divine thing you can do. You sit beside it too, and somehow you find yourself breathing slower. A tea tray arrives beside you with a handwritten note. You're not moss, but you're close. Well done. Eventually, on a misty morning, the moss is gone, and Baudet is back, stretching, yawning, carrying the faint scent of rain-soaked stone. She doesn't explain. No one asks. But she does glance at you once, her golden eyes gleaming, and she says, "Nice try." You return the next morning to a bit of unexpected pageantry. There's a banner above the tea shop now. It reads, "Loofahs of the Rising Steam Annual Convention today." Below it, a procession of small, puffed-up loofahs wrapped in miniature silk ropes. They're chanting very softly, like a rice steamer gently humming from a distance. Apparently, while Baudet was moss, the sacred loofahs reorganized. Again. Now they're not just a cult, they're a movement. Their goals? Unclear. Something about inner exfoliation and the search for the perfect scrub pattern. But they become highly coordinated. One loofah speaks with unexpected authority. It introduces itself as Lufiel, the grand gently abrasive. "Would you like a cleansing pamphlet?" It asks politely, offering a scroll that smells faintly of eucalyptus and irony. Baudet raises one eyebrow. "I was gone for 3 days." For Lufiel corrects gently. "We counted the moss hours. The loofahs are everywhere now, leading guided meditations in the koi pond, rolling across bamboo mats in synchronized spirals, holding impromptu tea ceremonies inside bathtubs. One has become the tea shop sommelier. It only recommends blends based on your aura's exfoliation levels. Even the mirror respects their rise, offering compliments like, "You look 30% smoother today." Coincidence? I think not. But tensions bubble beneath the surface. Some of the older towels feel displaced. A towel named Bertram insists that loofahs don't fold right and questions their eligibility for the spa's folding council. A brief debate is held in the Zen room. The topic: can one scrub and still be at peace? After 12 hours and 2 chamomile interventions, the consensus is maybe. But it ultimately allows the loofahs to stay. Her ruling is simple. They're weird, but they exfoliate my dreams. Let them have their spa. From then on, The loofahs continue their rituals, forming crescent moon circles in steam and occasionally levitating a bit from sheer serenity. A new spa service quietly appears on the menu. Loofah alignment therapy. Softly restructure your aura. Appointments fill fast. The banner is gone now. In its place, a soft silk ribbon hangs between two willow poles, fluttering with almost no wind. It's barely perceptible. If you weren't looking for it, you'd think it was just a dream from last night's tea. But something is different. The pebbles outside the shop have been swept into perfect spirals. The koi pond now glows gently at night without explanation. The lanterns blink and sync like they're part of a secret breath pattern. And in the center of it all, Batet, in a fresh robe stitched from mist and moon thread, standing beside a pillow-shaped podium made entirely of steamed bamboo. She raises one paw. The loofahs, towels, teacups, steam sprites, and even the opinionated mirror go silent. This is the grand reopening ceremony of the spa. No speeches, no fireworks, just a soft ribbon cutting with the gentlest snip-snipping sound you've ever not quite heard. The spa has a new name now. Whisper Mist Retreat. The letters appear as if written in condensation. They vanish if you breathe too hard. A gentle bell rings once. From the heavens, a rain of lotus petals descends. Each one lands without a sound. Not even the fox spirit, sipping an iced cloud latte in a corner, dares to slurp. One steam sprite bursts into happy sparkles. Another tries to clap, but settles for vibrating politely. The towels hand out tea menus that smell like memory foam and dreams. The spa robes guide new guests to hammocks that weren't there before. And on a floating piece of parchment near the door is the official rebranding statement. Welcome to the Whisper Mist Retreat. Please whisper your worries into the tea. We'll steep them into fog and send them drifting. Scholars still argue whether this counts as a real business model or a poetic mirage. But honestly, who cares? You're already reclining in a cloud hammock, sipping a brew called Fog of Forgetfulness with just a dash of vanilla. Outside, the mountain exhales like it's finally found its favorite pillow. You don't remember falling asleep, but you do remember floating. The teacup is still warm in your hands, though the tea itself seems to have drifted back into vapor. The clouds under your hammock sway, like they've memorized a lullaby. Around you, the last lanterns flicker, amber, rose, lavender, then pale moon white. Batet is gone. Not vanished, just elsewhere. She's always been that way, like sleep or dreams, or the precise moment you exhale completely without thinking about it. The fox spirit has fallen asleep in the foot-soaked tub, her tail coiled like a question mark. The mirror has fogged itself, finally deciding it doesn't need to offer any more opinions tonight. The scented pebbles have returned to their small dish beside the register, murmuring affirmations to one another in barely audible syllables. And as for you, well, you've become part of the steam now. You drift gently, wrapped in misty thoughts and long-forgotten stories. The world below fades into watercolors, soft blues, smudged golds, sleepier greens than you thought possible. There's a final sound. Not a gong, not a whisper. More like a sigh. The kind a cat makes when it curls up exactly right on a blanket warmed by a sunny windowsill. The spa exhales. Its breath turns into one last cloud, warm, fragrant, full of every good dream no one ever remembers fully. It floats through the air, past the koi pond, over the hammock garden, through the paper doors of the tea room, and finally up and over the hilltop. You watch it go. And just like that, the story settles. The lights dim. The petals stop falling. Even the steam pauses to listen. You are completely still now. No more questions. No more to-do lists. Not even a thought. just the soft weight of sleep pressing gently on your eyelids. This has been the story of Batet and her quiet tea shop. Or maybe it was your story all along. Either way. And now, the lanterns flicker slower. Their glow hums softer than breath, swaying gently with a breeze of dreams. You're still sitting by the crane's workshop, but everything is dimming, just enough to lose the sharp edges of the world. That final paper lantern drifts upward weightless, like a thought you've almost forgotten. The little tools are packed away. Brushes, wax, string, each folded into silence. The crane doesn't say goodbye. She just looks at you with a half smile, as if to say, "It's okay to rest now." The mountains hush. The pine trees bow. Somewhere in the dark, a bell chimes once, then never again. Even the stars above are blinking slower, like they too are drifting off. You feel your body melt slightly. The kind of melt that's just between warmth and weightlessness. Your eyes float. Your chest moves like a quiet tide. Even your thoughts, those busy, cluttered little fireflies, have finally stopped chasing themselves. You're not quite sure when the lantern workshop faded away. You're just here now. Soft, safe, held. Let the hush carry you. Let the last glow fade. There's nothing left to do tonight. Only sleep. Only stillness. Only dreams. Good night, friend.